Hi BookTube, and welcome to a Sideline video. In August, I took part in the Faulkner in August read-along, and I joined the Voxer group. I didn't leave a lot of comments, to be honest, but I really appreciated the comments from the other participants because many of them knew the novel and the author much better than I did. I did not have much to say because Faulkner was new territory for me. And yeah, all books are new territory, right, if you've not read them before. But with Faulkner, some new places are different than others. And Faulkner was one of those places. I could sense that the impressions that I was getting from the book, they just constituted one layer of what was in there. It was like I discovered this rich seam of ore that I could see on the surface. And I took away what I could quickly dig out without having to go too deep. But I knew that it was worthwhile constructing a mine and getting in there, that I would really get great riches if I dug even deeper. And the spoiler alert is up because spoilers are going to happen, I'm pretty sure. If you have not read As I Lay Dying and you'd like to form your own impressions of the book first before you get anybody else's, then please feel free, park up this video, come back at a better time. Okay, let's get started. This year, the Faulkner in August title was As I Lay Dying, written in 1930. Very short novel. I bought the Norton Critical paperback edition, and the novel text took up only 145 of the 427 pages. But as soon as I'd finished the novel, I realized that I needed to reread it at least once before I felt in a position to give you a review. And YouTube also, I could tell, had plenty of material for more experienced readers of Faulkner anyway. So rather than review this book, I thought, no, I'm just going to give you my first impressions, and also the impressions which were helped by others who knew the book better than I did. And one of those people was William Faulkner himself. On pages 192 to 197 in the paperback Norton Critical Edition, there are transcript excerpts. They're from 1957, and the University of Virginia invited Faulkner to address the student body in a series of lectures and also using the university's radio station to make broadcasts. The students submitted questions about As I Lay Dying, and I think the Norton edition was worth buying just to get this primary source of information, to get Faulkner's own views about the novel and its characters. And I'm going to read a couple of the questions to give you a taste, and then I'm going to zoom in on the question which interested me because it concerned the character of Darrell. Now, apologies ahead of time, I can't begin to reproduce Faulkner's accent, but you can hear it a little bit just in the words that he chooses. There is a recording on YouTube of Faulkner reading a passage from As I Lay Dying. It's the first passage in the novel that's narrated from the point of view of Tull, and I will leave a link to that in my description box. Right, here's my Norton Critical Edition, and I'm reading for page 193. Question: Mr. Faulkner, in As I Lay Dying, did Jewel purchase the horse as a substitute for his mother? Answer: well, now that's something for the psychologist. He bought that horse because he wanted that horse. Now, there was the need to use symbolism, which I dug around, scratched around in my lumber room, and dragged out. That was an indication, a simple trick way to show that he did not belong to that family, that he was the alien there. Now, just exactly what the connection is between the desire to buy a dangerous untamed horse and to be a country preacher, I don't know. But that was the reason for the horse, to show quickly that he did not belong to the rest of the family. Question: can we attach any significance to his letting his father sell the horse later on in the story? Answer: only that people want to do better than they can do. That this man, who loved nothing but that horse, would never have believed that he would have sacrificed that horse for anything. Yet, when the crisis came, he did behave better than he thought he would behave. He sacrificed the only thing he loved for someone else's good. Question: Mr. Faulkner, does Jewel actually know, or did he just sense, that he is illegitimate? Answer: I don't know, and he probably don't care. But his mother knew, and whether she ever... No, she probably never told him. To him, it made no difference. You can see, can't you? Those were just his comments on Jewel, and I found that fascinating just to hear the author speak for himself, and you can tell that he's trying to make choices, that he is trying to use symbolism. He's clear on that. But of course, the character I really wanted to know about was Darrell. So these are the two questions about Darrell that I'm going to read out now that I found really interesting. Question. In the same book, was Darrell out of his mind all through the book, or did that come as a result of things happening during the book? Answer. Darrell was mad from the first. He got progressively madder because he didn't have the capacity, not so much of sanity, but of inertness to resist all the catastrophes that happened to the family. Jewel resisted because he was sane and he was the toughest. The others resisted through probably simple inertia. But Darrell couldn't resist it, and so he went completely off his rocker, but he was mad all the time. Question. Is that why he speaks more beautifully than anybody else? Answer. Yes. So I really appreciate this question and answer section of the book because I wanted confirmation that Faulkner had given Darrell this broader vocabulary as an indication of some kind of mental instability. That was good to know. And this is just a personal reaction, but it wasn't a choice that convinced me as I was reading. Those occasions when Darrell would use English in a way that no one in his family and none of his neighbors did, these felt, you could feel the author coming in. You could feel the conscious choice of the author. It was made obvious to me. I was always conscious that Darrell was effectively channeling Faulkner because Faulkner had this ability to use English that way. And maybe this was Faulkner's way of saying that some mental illnesses they give you a connection with something else. They give you a connection to a greater intellect or a greater vision. And this is a very romantic conception of mental illness. And Faulkner and I, we wouldn't see eye to eye on that subject. But some years back, had I read the novel then, I probably would have accepted the idea more readily. Something that wasn't in Faulkner's question and answer, but I wanted to know about, was that Faulkner seemed to give Darrell the ability to perceive things that wasn't limited by time or space. There is a section, the 5th section, that is headed Darrell. Therefore, I presume it's supposed to be his narration, his point of view. It's the one that begins, Pa stands beside the bed. And I'm going to read just the first paragraph. Pa stands beside the bed. From behind his leg, Vardaman peers, with his round head and his eyes round and his mouth beginning to open. She looks at Pa. All her failing life appears to drain into her eyes, urgent, irremediable. It's Jewel she wants, Dewey Dell says. Why, Addie, Pa says, him and Darrell went to make one more load. They thought there was time, that you would wait for them, and that $3 and all. He stoops, laying his hand on hers. For a while yet she looks at him, without reproach, without anything at all, as if her eyes alone are listening to the irrevocable cessation of his voice. Aunt is telling Addie that Darrell and Jewel are away. So if this section is headed Darrell, is Darrell narrating these events, and how so? Is he imagining them? Or is this what actually happens and he can see it? My guess was that Faulkner decided that Darrell's mental illness, with the state that it was in, made his mind not limited in time and space. This is a very romantic idea of mental illness again, and so I don't really see eye to eye with Faulkner. That being said, of course, it's possible that Faulkner didn't believe it either, because you can put anything in fiction that you want. It's a decision, and it may or may not reflect what the author actually believes in. So if I put it more thoughtfully, I had difficulty accepting that Darrell's state of mind could give him extrasensory perception or vocabulary that he'd probably never heard or never read. The novel did get me wondering whether we ought to move away from using the term stream of consciousness now. I love how I do this, right? Big revolution, okay? But I feel that we need a new way to talk about this literary technique. And I'm going to suggest a term, because my video, so I can, right? I'm going to suggest we talk about consciousness modeling. And that's The reason I say that is because the various authors, particularly the modernist ones that we associate with stream of consciousness, Faulkner, Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, what they do differently from one another. And also, what we get in stream of consciousness writing is not a representation of consciousness. It's only a representation of a fraction of consciousness. It's that part of consciousness where the mind is choosing to talk to itself, what it's choosing to talk about. The University of Oregon have got a fabulous online resource, by the way. It's a collection of instructional videos that help with understanding literary terms like stream of consciousness. In the stream of consciousness video, the definition is very good. The instructor uses a personal example to illustrate the concept. She talks about how just that morning she had walked to the university library and she'd entered a particular room with a sound engineer to record the video. And she talks about how in her mind, as her mind was talking to herself, it didn't talk through all the steps of that journey. She didn't sort of say, oh, now I'm walking to the library on a January morning. Now I'm going up the steps. Now I'm opening the door. Now I'm climbing the stairs to the third floor where all the recording rooms are. Now I say good morning to the sound engineer. She says, my brain doesn't think any of that in its talking to itself. She tried to give an impression of what it did think and talk about, which was more about the temperature and what she was going to make for dinner and was she running late, things like that. And so she said, you know, it's that brain chatter that is what stream of consciousness tries to reproduce. The jumble of reactions to her immediate surroundings and also some memories and self-questioning. Just an interruption here before we carry on with the topic. The photographs that you're going to see from now on are taken from William Faulkner's residence at Rowan Oak, which was in Oxford, Mississippi. This is a picture of his office. The writing on the wall, I think, is planning for a novel. I didn't read enough to tell you which one. Go look up the Rowan Oak website because it's quite lovely. Going back to the university video where the lady's explaining stream of consciousness, how it works, what she doesn't say is that, yes, her brain is doing all this chatter and leaving out a lot of things, not telling a full story. However, her brain is registering all that information that would be helpful to narration, you know, where she's moving from and to, what day it is, you know, how she gets up to the book. It's recording all that, but it's doing it silently. The mind does not, it cannot talk about everything it perceives. And so stream of consciousness as a fiction technique is always incomplete consciousness. A reader isn't getting the full experience of stepping into a human brain. It's only getting a transcript of all the brain chatter. Anything the brain is perceiving silently, the visuals, the colors, the smells, that doesn't show up on the transcript, right? So it doesn't show up in the novel text, unless, of course, the novelist cheats. Okay, it's not really cheating if a writer does that, because a writer can do whatever they want. But Faulkner, if we're going to use this term, we'll say Faulkner does cheat. He has to. He has to in order to give the reader enough information so that you know what is going on. For example, in the section that's narrated by Darrell that begins, before us, the thick, dark current runs. This is describing the Bundren family and Tull. They're trying to get the mule-drawn wagon that's carrying Addie's coffin across the river, which has been swollen by heavy rains, and so it's very dangerous crossing. Most of this passage is first-person narrative, conventional first-person narrative, not stream of consciousness. And that's necessary because the human brain, in the kind of crisis that the Bundren family put themselves through, it would probably talk to itself very, very little. It would need to react faster than it could use language. And it would not talk to itself about what it saw or heard or did in the moment the way Darrell does. Darrell speaks in the present tense in that section, not the past tense. So he is not recalling. He's not looking back on events and thinking how he reacted at the time. He's living them and talking about them all at the same time. And that isn't stream of consciousness, because the mind would not be able to tell itself a story about how it coped with a very dangerous situation while it was coping with a very dangerous situation. I've added this picture of the kitchen in Rowan Oak because Faulkner liked to write here in the winter because it was the warmest room in the house. So going back to this business of using the term stream of consciousness or not, the reason I think it would be good to replace the term stream of consciousness with something like consciousness modeling is because then you could start to talk about how Virginia Woolf models consciousness versus how William Faulkner models it versus how James Joyce does, etc., etc. Each model is different. And it's good also, when we use the word modeling, then we're aware that the author is just creating a model. He's not trying or succeeding in transcribing the full experience of actual human consciousness. And that's why the novels that are labeled stream of consciousness are so difficult to understand. It's not possible to use language to give you everything that a human brain does, is it? And so really the novels that are called stream of consciousness they're really partial consciousness. That's what they are. If it were possible to use language to create full consciousness, great. We would find the novels really easy to read, but it's not. What the reader actually gets is just this partial consciousness, a transcript of some brain chatter and some cheating. Some places where the author has to make a decision, conscious or otherwise, to add writing that is not, strictly speaking, conscious mind chatter, and it's a concession to the reader to help them to comprehend. Now, I wouldn't have come to this realization if it weren't for Faulkner. And I think it's because As I Lay Dying cuts up the narrative into so many tiny pieces, and that it keeps forcing you to pause. And by forcing me to pause, that helped. I've read Virginia Woolf before, and Virginia Woolf, I don't know, when I read her stream of consciousness, I tend to get caught almost in a flow, like I am being carried along in a stream. You find it harder to get that in As I Lay Dying because there's all these discrete pieces that break things up. And that was good because it really made me aware of the choices that Faulkner was making with this narration. It's fascinating, and it makes me wonder if Faulkner made the same or slightly different choices in his other novels, and I'm looking forward to finding out. The choices Faulkner made in As I Lay Dying also, they fascinated me because I was never sure whether I was dealing with everyday reality that I know, or whether this novel was taking me to some kind of transcendent or theatrical or mythic reality. One thing I did contribute to the Voxer group was a link to a JSTOR article written by Elizabeth M. Kerr, who was the professor of American literature at the University of Wisconsin. She discussed whether As I Lay Dying was meant to be viewed as an ironic or a skewed version of the romantic quest, like the legends of King Arthur's knights or the stories of medieval troubadours, where a man or a men, they undertake an ordeal, and it's in chivalric service to their chosen lady, and the chosen lady in this case being Addie. That idea interests me because it explains why the Bundrans are so irrationally fixated with transporting Addie's body, even though it isn't the kindest thing to do to a dead person. She's decomposing in that coffin over the days that they are traveling, and why they willingly sacrifice and suffer so much for the sake of this task. It also explains their cultish devotion to Ans, the patriarch, who must be the person least deserving of that kind of devotion. And that is it, everybody. That is just my immediate impressions of the novel. I can tell that there's more. There's much more that I could take from just this one Faulkner novel. It makes me wonder, how many times am I going to have to read Faulkner's other novels? But I'm going to have to. Faulkner has too much to offer to be ignored. And so I should thank BookTube. I should thank the hosts, particularly of the Faulkner in August read-along, but also I'm going to shout out to a particular creator, to Brian at Bookish Texan, who clearly loves Faulkner, and you can't help but be influenced by that kind of enthusiasm. I'm going to close this video by wishing everyone great reading for September. So whether you're doing Shorty September or you're doing Shake-tember, or if you're doing both, well then power to you. It makes me tired just thinking about it, but if you have the energy and the time in the books, then terrific. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. I'll see you again in a few days' time. Bye-bye.